Her wacky hairstyle and comments about her slacker spouse Fang brought millions of laughs to Phyllis Diller's face. However, a woman engulfed in secrets lurked beyond the laughter. For more than 3 decades, she made the weekly drive to the same spot, a hidden spot that her devoted followers were unaware of. She loved someone more than anyone else, and they were inside those walls. Someone about whom she would be shamed if she brought up the subject on stage. The actual pain of separation started in 1993, when the visits ceased. Even when her heart stopped beating, Phyllis continued working because of what she kept hidden from the public. On July 17, 1917, Phyllis Diller entered this world in Lima, Ohio. Both of her parents were quite elderly for their time. Perry, her dad, was 55 years old, and Frances, her mom, was 36. Phyllis was perpetually in the company of the elderly at funerals, when she was a tiny kid because of this. She had an unusual fascination with death, when most children dread it. Her comedic later work revolved around her peculiar ease with heavy subjects. Phyllis has always been atheist, despite the fact that she was born into a Methodist family of German-Irish ancestry. She overcame adversity at a young age by becoming humorous rather than bitter. She enjoyed hanging out with her peers outside of class at Lima's Central High School and making light-hearted jokes. Those insignificant incidents were the catalyst for a far greater development. Her family's financial situation was utterly devastated when the Great Depression struck in the 1930s. She began selling newspapers to make ends meet, laying the groundwork for the resilience she would need in the years to come. She had no idea that her last name had changed generations ago from Triber until she was an adult. It was a strange twist of fate. She spent much of her childhood in a quiet, often lonely house, where she frequently made up stories. Those anecdotes quickly became tired cliches. In 1927, at the tender age of 10, Sherwood Music Conservatory in Chicago accepted Phyllis. She has exceptional piano talents for her age. She began performing professionally with orchestras in 1939. However astounding that may sound, she resigned. The reason was not a lack of ability, but rather the conviction that she would never measure up to her instructors. Though it hurt, she had to make the choice she knew was wrong. Difficulty persisted during the Great Depression. She stayed in Sherwood for 3 years until her family's finances dried up in 1933. If she wanted to stay alive, she had to take any job she could get. Suspending her singing career might have been her salvation, she said afterwards. It was her fault. Aiming for something even better, she had rooted herself. She gave college another go in 1935. At Bluffton University, I am majoring in music education. However, she departed once more by 1937, this time to tie the knot. For a long time, she felt bad about letting her dreams go. In any case, she would find humor somehow. With her husband Sherwood's work at a bomber production, Phyllis relocated to Ypsilanti, Michigan in 1940. It was a tough time. On September 27th of same year, their son Peter was born. Wartime rationing meant that families could only afford $25 a week. She was driven to postpartum depression by the combination of financial hardship and the demands of parenting. They ended up in California after moving 8 times between 1940 and 1945. Although Sherwood was employed at the Lima Naval Air Station, Phyllis was the one who was keeping everything in place. As she worked around the house, she found solace in listening to her favorite radio programs. A seed was established by those sounds and those jokes. Sally was born in 1944, her second child. Phyllis found work as an editor for a newspaper when Sherwood was frequently out of work at this period. Later on, that experience would turn out to be her greatest asset. Back in 1953, their home was almost lost to them. However, it ended up being the turning point in her story rather than the breaking point. Her professional life was set to begin at the age of 37. The birth of her son in 1945 was a tragic event. It has been said that they called him Perry. Reports vary as to who exactly perished. In the span of only 2 weeks he departed this world. At a later date, she was crushed. His doctors blamed his early delivery and the inadequacy of medical care available during that time. Sherwood had recently lost his work, and they were still residing in Alameda. Uncertainty permeated every aspect. Even though she was only 28 years old, Phyllis channeled her anguish into action. She became involved in San Francisco theater plays at a local level. It was through performing that she was able to bury her sorrow. It wasn't the end of the heartbreak, though. Just a short time later, she had a miscarriage. 6 pregnancies would occur within the following decade. There were just 5 kids that made it. She put on a brave face and resumed writing at this time, submitting articles for $2 apiece, while she masked her sadness. With the years 1946, 1950 passing, Phyllis has a son named Perry, as well as Suzanne and Stephanie as children. As a result, 5 children are still alive. Unfortunately, their wealth remained stagnant even as her family mushroomed. Sherwood turned down employment he considered beneath him and squandered an inheritance of $10,000 that could have spared their lives. They were so low income that even powdered milk was out of their price range. Writing for local papers brought in $15 to $20 weekly for Phyllis. It was a tough go. She was single with 5 children under the age of 10 and had no one to turn to for assistance. But instead of crumbling under the pressure, she made light of the situation. Her comedic future would be replete with tales of irate spouses and frantic parenting. But at the time, it didn't seem amusing at all. Descending into the depths seems impossible. The situation worsened by 1952. Their $300 in overdue rent led to their eviction from the house. Phyllis began receiving a steady salary of $75 per week in the same year from Caro in Oakland, where she worked as a radio copywriter. Their rescue was made possible by the job. She made a 15-minute program mocking housewife advice called Phyllis Diller, the homely friend maker. This individual's given name was ridiculous, but it empowered her. She gave it a go after 2 years of Sherwood's constant prodding to perform. In a veterans hospital, she gave her debut performance, missed the mark spectacularly. As she played the piano, patients taunted her. She persisted though. The shame became motivation for her. Her debut stand-up performance was that very year. Then again, what if she persisted despite having trouble paying rent and having to pawn her jewels? No one knew how tough things truly were for her. Next, the pivotal moment arrived. At the age of 37, Phyllis gave a performance at the Purple Onion in San Francisco on March 7, 1955. The crowd adored her. She had no interest in striving to be a Hollywood starlet. Her life, her food, and her appearance were all targets of her mockery. She made a joke about how her cuisine may be fatal. Everyone was in fits of laughter. A brief engagement ballooned into an 89-week run, spanning nearly 2 years. Her performances brought in over $100,000 for the club, and all of a sudden, this exhausted mother of 5 was getting serious attention. By the next year, she had landed TV commercials while only making $100 per week. She was engrossed in a self-help read a book titled The Magic of Believing, which she said was the final push she needed to step onto the stage. She finally found her calling after 15 years of staying at home. Her life took a dramatic turn in 1956. An iconic stage look was her creation. She looked both ludicrous and brilliant in her mismatched clothing, wild horsehair wig, heavily cosmetically painted face, and long cigarette holder, despite the fact that she hardly smoked. It was deliberate on her part. Unafraid to blend in, she made her statement at nearly 40 years old. She made herself look as hideous as possible, and then celebrated it, rather than attempting to be attractive. Almost immediately, her reservations increased by 40%. Her appearances on national shows began. Over the years, her wig collection ballooned to 50 pieces, with prices ranging from $50 to $100. Her trademark cigarette case was an ivory accessory that was 12 inches in length. Her legend grew to include all of this. But behind it all, she was trying to conceal the hurt she felt from a marital crisis. She channeled her suffering into strength. Like a lampshade in a whose title surprised everyone, and some stores refused to sell it, Phyllis's debut comedy album was released on June 15, 1958. Yet in its debut year, it sold more than 50,000 copies. Subtly referencing Sherwood, her gags involved a fake husband named Fang, who was described as indolent. She made the album in a cramped studio in L.A., with only 20 other people. The wit was quick and unfiltered. Her word-per-minute rate reached 200. In 1959, she had earned $10,000 in royalties from the album, which helped her secure TV deals. Fang, too, came from an unusual family. She preserved the line, which originated from a script typo, and went on to write more than 1,000 jokes involving him. With this album's success, women proved they could be as fearless, hilarious, and fierce as any man on stage. She was performing continuously by 1959. The Blue Angel Club in New York was one of more than 150 places she performed. All in all, she made $25,000 after traveling 50,000 meters, which was 3 times her previous earnings from only 4 years before. She kept 50,000 jokes in a steel cabinet, organized by subject on index cards. After each show, she would sit down at her typewriter and compose 100 new jokes weekly. She broke down in tears after a 48-hour travel due to her extreme fatigue from performing so frequently. However, she persisted even after that. In 1961, a rather peculiar occurrence occurred on television. All that changed on April 5th, when a woman appeared on the Jack Paar show. She didn't meet the standards of Hollywood beauty in any way. She was elderly, unpolished, and unbecoming. Her age was 43. Phyllis Diller was her name. She began her comedic career at the age of 37, had 5 children from a previous marriage that had ended in divorce, and had only been performing for a short time. Many would have given up. However, she stood under the intense studio lighting, a frightening wig atop her head, a lengthy cigarette holder in her hand, and an audible cackle that elicited gasps or laughter from onlookers. Her challenges were obvious to everyone. The joke was on her. Before anybody else could, she made fun of her tumultuous family situation and labeled herself ugly. You couldn't find a TV host like her. Absolutely not one. Still, she persisted, her fear evident in her trembling hands that strained to keep the microphone steady. She was noticed for more than just that one appearance. It catapulted her to fame. Shows started calling again. Roseanne Barr and other comedians would later attest that she had a profound impact on their lives after she made an appearance on Ed Sullivan's show. This ugly duckling, as she was affectionately known, had overnight become famous. In 1966, 5 years after that, Phyllis took yet another bold move. The Puss of Southampton, her debut sitcom, ran on ABC. She portrayed the role of a wealthy woman who went broke in secret but pretended to be well off so no one would suspect a thing. It was a crazy spectacle. There was an episode where she attempted to use a washing machine to cook a turkey. Strange personalities abound throughout the episode, including Paul Lynde and John Aston. The show was rebranded as The Phyllis Diller Show in the middle of the season. The month of January 1967. The 30-episode run concluded in April. The reviews were negative. Out of 91 shows, it came in at number 77. Still, she was nominated for a Golden Globe despite the film's failure. Plus, it prompted another realization. Failure didn't scare Phyllis. In real life and on television, one of the worst programs of all time according to TV Guide. However, she persisted in appearing rather than hiding it. When the troops needed a laugh, she and Bob Hope would go on tour together, even during the Vietnam War. Simultaneously, she discovered a second sanctuary on game shows. When 1967 rolled around, she became a staple on the squares in Hollywood. She was a regular cast member up until 1980, appearing in 28 episodes. From her cramped tic-tac-toe booth, she unleashed memorable punchlines. That was her charm. She famously rushed after a garbage truck and said, "Am I too late for the trash?" The driver responded, "No, jump right in." That was her comedy. A master of self-deprecation, She had everyone in stitches. It was well received. She wasn't putting on a show, she became famous for being authentic. The production crew treated the show like a bash. She became close friends with the other celebrities, while taping 5 episodes daily. Even her fans got a glimpse of her quirky side. She was a terrible singer. She was a heavy smoker. With 6 children at home, she hardly had time to sleep. But she managed to make it all funny. Eddie Murphy echoed her sentiment, saying that she made him chuckle too. And she was being serious. Even before her name was known, she was paving the way for women like Ellen DeGeneres. She went on to get her own variety show in 1968. The title of it was The Lovely Phyllis Beginning. On September 15th, it ran on NBC as part of The Diller Show. The 13-part series concluded in December. On the broadcast, guests were interviewed and included musical performances. In attendance were luminaries including Norm Crosby, Bob Hope, and Goldie Hawn. Despite her inability to sing, she continued to do so. Phyllis was the one. Irrespective of whether it was absolutely ideal, having a good time was her only goal. After 3 months it was discontinued due to poor ratings once again. However, her notoriety was further enhanced by this setback. Stars like Lady Gaga would take cues from her daring outfits, massive hair, and untamed performances. She rejoined Bob Hope on his Vietnam tour that same year. In the animated film Mad Monster Party, she provided the voice of the monster's partner. Even if it wasn't always reflected in the ratings, she was ubiquitous. She didn't have a massive 1970s cinema career, but she did have several memorable roles. She played the role of Mrs. Zero in the 1969 film The Adding Machine. The film bombed at the box office, but critics were taken aback by her raw emotions and seriousness. She made a brief appearance in 1975. The 1977 film, The Great Balloon Race, and the Oscar-winning film The Sunshine Boys. Appointment in A Pleasure Doing Business followed 2 years afterwards. At about the same time, on December 26, 1969, she assumed the role of lead in the Broadway musical Hello, Dolly. Doing 8 shows every week, she was 52 years old. Behind closed doors, her domestic life was in shambles, but no one knew. She was left to bring up 5 children alone by her husband Sherwood, who had been diagnosed with a mental disorder in the 1950s. For the sake of paying the bills, she worked every night. Regardless, she persisted. While judging ludicrous acts on The Gong Show in 1976, she couldn't help but laugh through the chaos. Her voice was all over the place as she played, shouted, laughed, and appeared on Match Game PM. Not only that, but she made guest appearances on The Love Boat and The Muppet Show in 1979, once more from 1977 to 1986. She had more than 40 film credits by the decade's end. On one of their 1966 films, she even made more money than Bob Hope. Her timing was impeccable, and I was sure I had the wrong number. Also, she recorded an album. It was released in 1968, with the title Born to Sing. Nothing major happened. She used her own voice as a punchline. The songs were intentionally off-key and humorous, but that was the intended effect. It was well received. She performed stand-up comedy alongside her musical performances. Satisfaction, Hello Young Lovers, All Done Her Way, and more comedic tunes were in her set list. Although album sales were average, they boosted her tour sales to sold-out events. The fact that she recorded it while enduring torture was unknown to most. This was the end of her marriage. Cash was tight for her. Phyllis secretly visited her daughter Sally once a week for decades after she was diagnosed with schizophrenia. On display, she grinned. She was hardly controlling her emotions behind closed doors. She got her 1968 TV show because of that album. As for 1972, in the latest Scooby-Doo flicks, she mocked psychic readings by lending her voice to the role. A lot of people loved her. She had many admirers in the gay community who found beauty in her fearless use of color and honesty. She has a discography of more than 10 albums.
They were all minor acts of defiance. She transformed into someone else, a voice in the 90s. She had a role as the Mouse Queen in the 1990 Canadian animated picture The Nutcracker Prince, which earned a pitiful $1 at the box office. $7 million from a $8,500,000 allotted. However, her performance was exceptional. Her wicked comical voice brought a smile to parents' faces and giggles to children's. In 1998, she co-starred in the $363 million smash hit A Bug's Life. Her life was once again characterized by subtle sadness, even as her voice soars in cartoons. Peter, her son, had cancer in 1990, and Sally, her daughter, remained in an institution. In 1998, at the age of 53, he passed away. She continued her tour in solitude, beaming the whole time. Nothing had ever been done before what she accomplished in 1984. She actually produced a home movie about plastic surgery, not joking about it. We spent $39. This home DVD instruction to plastic surgery, hosted by Phyllis Diller, cost $95. It covered a lot of ground, including her facelifts and nose jobs. She mentioned that it had a positive impact on her spirit in addition to her appearance. Her surgeon was so stingy with his money that he chewed off her earring, she joked. However, this was daring as well as humorous. Everyone kept their surgeries a secret back then. The American Academy of Cosmetic Surgery honored her for her candor. People paid attention when she proclaimed herself the plastic surgery queen. She normalized discussing it. Not even Joan Rivers dared to disobey her. Starting in 1985, she made a living off of her style. Her own range of wild clothing and wigs was released. She was making jokes into serious make-a profit. She made a living selling wigs and costumes inspired by her own crazy hairstyle, vivid, boisterous and unmistakable. Her natural hair couldn't take the constant picking at her wigs, so she wore them every day for a long time. Many of her drag performers and homosexual admirers looked up to her, seeing her as more than simply a clown. They saw her as a queen, thanks to her enterprise, which was very lucrative for her. At the age of 79, she stunned everyone once again in 1996. The Bold and the Beautiful featured her appearance on The Flawless in her role as the colorful and clever makeup artist Gladys Pope. She surprised everyone with her 11 episodes, which mixed comedy and drama. It was well received. Her health was deteriorating, which most people were unaware of. Despite the fact that she required a pacemaker by 1999 due to her heart stopping in 1997, she persisted, and she never did. Her last stand-up special was in 1998. Phyllis Diller, who is always up for a good chuckle, was the host of this NPR show. Her age was 81. She sounded trembling. She still manages to make people laugh at their aging. There was anguish concealed beneath the laughter. Her son had passed away that very year, but she kept her tears hidden from view. Laughter was her specialty. Greg Barson directed the special, which included Roseanne Barr and others telling anecdotes. Without actually stating it, it was a farewell. She continued to make cameo appearances all the way up into 2007. Her will persisted, even as her physical self deteriorated. The year 1939 marked Phyllis Diller's first marriage. When it happened, it felt like any other ordinary love tale. Blueton, Ohio was the site of their November 4th elopement with Sherwood Diller. Unbeknownst to her, she would spend the subsequent 26 years feigning contentment while in reality, everything was anything but. Sherwood refused to settle into a routine and battled agoraphobia. Because of this, Phyllis was left to shoulder the full burden of supporting her 5 children while also working as a newspaper writer, editor, and whatever else she could. There had been one infant death before this one. Sherwood was the sole breadwinner for her family, even though she was a chronic absenteeism at her bomber manufacturing job during WW. She kept quiet about all that was truly happening. For comedic effect against a slacker spouse, she developed the character Fang, yet the agony was palpable. Causing her to chuckle, She was actually trying to hide her quiet poverty, emotional abuse, and gambling losses. I got a divorce on Monday, September 3, 1965. She denied the extent to which it had wounded her until much later. She remarried in the span of a month. She felt like she was quickly escaping the past when she married actor Ward Donovan on October 7, 1965. But the new chapter became much darker even more quickly. It failed in a matter of months. He overindulged in alcohol, vanished into his business dealings, and she found herself feeling alone once more. Although they didn't formalize the divorce until 1975, she filed for it 3 months later. She initially chose to remain silent regarding his adultery and the mayhem at home. She joked about useless husbands on stage later on, using laughter to mask her loneliness because she didn't want scandal to destroy her climb. It was actually only 22 weeks long the first time. The subsequent hush was deafening, and he was absent more often than present. Something gentler came into her life after a while. Robert Hastings was someone she met in 1985. Despite not being her husband, he ended up being her one true love. Until his death from cancer on May 23, 1996, they shared her large Brentwood estate. Never remarried, she was 78 years old at the time. He referred to her as his soulmate in an interview. Away from the anguish of her younger years, they would play gin rummy in the privacy of their home. This time it was genuine, after all that public smiling through sadness. Legal ties were something she was never a fan of. It was sufficient to have that peaceful company. However, that was not the end of Phyllis's personal troubles. Despite the 1944 birth of her daughter Sally, something was obviously wrong by the 1950s. Wrong. For years Phyllis attempted to handle Sally's schizophrenia at home, but the illness eventually took over her life. Tragically, she decided to put her in institutional care about 1960. Even though her emotionally unstable husband was a further source of stress, she never included any of this in her performances.
The image of the happy housewife was something she maintained. Fans didn't find out about her scandal till much later, had on board. In 1993, at the young age of 49, Sally passed away. In the midst of the pain of losing yet another child, Phyllis had to keep smiling. July 4, 2002 followed. What started off as a celebratory day took a rather different turn. Stephanie, her daughter, died at the young age of 54 from a stroke. After marrying Stephanie in 1973, Phyllis helped raise their 3 children. Now all of a sudden, she was saying goodbye. She continued to work tirelessly. Despite her busy schedule and powerful connections, the 84-year-old mother was struggling to recover from the deaths of her son Peter in 1998, daughter Sally, 1993, and she refrained from openly expressing her grief. She had already suffered through a distinct form of heartache in 1945. 2 weeks after his birth, her infant son passed away. It followed a miscarriage that had previously occurred. Really disturbed her. Although she and Sherwood had Peter in 1940 and Sally in 1944, the unexpected loss of a baby was unimaginable. For years she kept quiet about it. She kept quiet about it all until 2005's Like a Lampshade in a White House, her memoir. His burial took place in silence in Lima, Ohio. Phyllis had outlived 4 of her 6 children when she passed away in 2012, the kind of anguish that would be impossible to laugh off. Born in 1950 was her youngest child, Harry. Because of his dyslexia, he had a terrible time at home and in school. Amidst Sally's sickness and the mounting number of deaths, Harry's reading difficulties felt like yet another obstacle. Still, he succeeded. He persisted, worked their way up the corporate ladder, and became the one overseeing the activities of his mother. Amidst a tempest of despair, he stood out. Perry remained by her side, and outlived her through it all, demonstrating that not every chapter had to conclude with sadness. Neither the 1940s nor the 1950s were glitzy. She barely made rent while residing in a trailer park with her 5 children. Once again, Sherwood had failed, and the family was on the verge of being evicted.
She found solace in performing stand-up comedy in laundromats. At the age of 37, she broke through in 1955 with an 89-week run at San Francisco's Purple Onion. Her journey to the stage was driven by desperation rather than fantasies. The Magic of Believing, a self-help book, encouraged her to persevere. Nonetheless, she was on the verge of insolvency and had gone through 2 divorces by the 1970s. Despite her reticence, the story was revealed in court papers. Ward said he only made $500 a month, but she was actually making $100,000 and was able to support her family. She endured grueling touring schedules, performing as much as 200 gigs a year. People laughed at her quips about Fang, but she was fighting for her life financially. Things became more stable after she won a $5 million lawsuit in 1979 regarding song rights. She continued to rebuild on her own. When the men fled the scene of the mayhem, she also literally rebuilt herself. Her extensive history with plastic surgery started in 1972. 15 procedures had passed by 1990. She was momentarily paralyzed after the initial facelift, which almost killed her. She eventually had her nose altered, breasts decreased, cheeks filled, and eyes enlarged, eyeliner that is raised or even tattooed. She made a joke about how different sections of her body were now all the same age. She humored it in an interview that she gave in 1993. The procedures weren't for show though, they protected. After one of them caused her heart to cease beating in 1999, she had a pacemaker put in. She started writing in 1981 when she was 64 years old. To make people laugh at their fears about aging, she wrote The Joys of Aging and How to Avoid Them. The book did well in sales, similar to her previous works. She channeled her voice into writing, which allowed her to give life to her anguish. Concurrently, she was still working through the emotional fallout of her divorce and attempting to adapt to a rapidly evolving environment. She unveiled something fresh after retiring from stand-up comedy in 2002, when she was 85 years old. She dabbled with painting. An art gallery was transformed into her residence. As her visitors posed for photos in front of a spotlight painting in her entryway, she smiled and sold her artwork at intimate gatherings. A few of her pieces fetched $5,000 each. Even her grand piano was part of the estate sale in 2013. She spent 15 years on a single picture. Despite having to postpone an appearance on The Tonight Show to celebrate her 90th birthday in 2007 due to a back injury, she never stopped making art. She fought silent fights until her last years. She suffered a heart arrest in 1999. Everything had come to a halt for her. She overcame her paralysis caused by medication reactions with the help of therapy. She continued to provide her voice to characters in series like Family, even in 2005. Guy, television resounding with her distinctive chuckle. Despite the fact that she was overcome with despair, heart problems, and ancient hurts, she persisted. On May 15, 2012, in Lima, Ohio, she accepted a Lifetime Achievement Award, marking her final public appearance. She grinned, despite her fragile appearance. At the age of 95, she passed away in her Brentwood home on August 20, 2012. The final straw was her failing heart. According to her manager, she smiled as she passed away in her sleep. Following her cremation, her remains were dispersed at sea. It reflected her carefree nature and was uncomplicated. Afterwards, the world learned about her hidden struggles with despair, severe pain, and intolerable